Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation for this conference. I will be speaking on the origins of the conflict between Poland and Germany, which led to the Second World War in 1939. I think that we must start by some remarks on the Versailles Treaty. We have 100 years anniversary of this great moment in the Polish history. I think you know that on June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles Peace Treaty with Germany was signed, and it brought Poland the new border with Germany. Reborn Poland received new border with Germany. Poland was given all the territories which were incorporated to the Kingdom of Prussia due to the partitions in the end of 18th century. And especially, one thing should be highlighted. Poland was given a free access to the sea, territorial access to the sea. It was in correspondence with the program of the President Wilson, 13th point of his statement in Congress in January 1918. All these territories were under the strong dispute between newly recreated Poland and Germany. Polish-German relations in the interwar era functioned under the strong antagonism, under the shadow of deep antagonism. This territorial dispute had the large consequences for the international stability and for the international peace under the Versailles Order in the interwar era. However, after very turbulent period of antagonism in 1933 and 1934, a visible improvement in the relations between Berlin and Warsaw was made. In spring 1933, the idea of a preventive war against Germany was discussed between Polish and French government. It was the idea of Marshal Piłsudski, and rumors on it produced a modification of the German policy toward Poland. New Chancellor Hitler received Polish envoy to Berlin, and he officially declared that Germany has no idea to violate the international obligations in which she is the side. After some months of new climate in Polish-German relations, in the end of 1933, both governments started formal negotiations on the non-aggression agreement. German government rejected the idea of non-aggression pact because pact has juridical forms, and Germany had no idea to conclude such an agreement, but German government proposed a declaration on non-aggression. It is not exact to speak on Polish-German pact. Sometimes it appears in the school books, in monographs, historical monographs, in public discourse. There was no non-aggression pact. It was only a declaration which was concluded for 10 years of validity. And this declaration contain no mention on the borders problem. Border problems were omitted in the declaration, Polish-German declaration, adopted only an idea of the peaceful resolution of the disputes in the future on the basis of the Bianca-Locke Pact of 1928. After the signature of the non-aggression declaration on January 26 in 1934, it began a 5 years détente period of détente, 5 years period of Polish-German détente. There was no Polish-German cooperation. We cannot see any cooperation between both governments, but it should be said that this was a period of normalization of the relations between both governments. The German government did not raise any territorial questions for these 5 years. The agreement of January 1934 was provisional. It was a provisional agreement, provisional understanding between both governments. In 1936 and 1937, Polish Foreign Ministry elaborated a new proposal for new agreement with Germany. It was contained of 2 points. Firstly, Polish government wanted to stabilize Polish-German relations by a new treaty on non-aggression, not declaration, but treaty. Secondly, Polish government had the idea to preserve the existence of the free city of Gdańsk by a special Polish-German agreement. And lastly, Polish-German government wanted to start the negotiations on the German communication through Polish Pomerania. Germans called this Polish Pomerania as Polish corridor to the sea, Polish corridor. In 1938, under the shadow of appeasement policy of the Western powers, Polish Foreign Minister Beck wanted to start the negotiations on this program. But Hitler rejected the proposal, saying to Polish ambassador in Berlin, Lipski, that this can be solved in the future, that Polish-German relations will be improved and will be solved, that the problems will be solved in the future. It is true that after the Munich conference, in the end of September 1938, Poland's international position was very, very weak. We must remember that in this time, Germany became the major European power, and after dismemberment of Czechoslovakia, after the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia, Germany played cardinal role in the Central European politics. Western powers were passive, generally passive. They had no idea to oppose successfully to Germany. Great Britain was disarmed. France had, of course, large army, but this army was governed by the defensive idea of fighting, which is symbolized by the conception of the Maginot Line. On October 24, in 1938, German Foreign Minister von Ribbentrop invited Polish ambassador Count Lipski to Berchtesgaden to discuss the general solution in Polish-German relations, the idea of German general solution Gesamtlösung in German. This Gesamtlösung, German general solution proposals, were contained of 3 points. 2 of them signified territorial demands. First of all, Free City of Gdańsk will be incorporated to Germany. Secondly, the extraterritorial line, railway and highway, will be constructed through Polish Pomerania to East Prussia. Extraterritorial connection, extraterritoriale Verbindung in German. And lately, Poland was invited to the Anti-Comintern Pact. Anti-Comintern Pact, it was a pact of Germany, Japan and Italy against the Communist International, de facto against the Soviet Union. Ribbentrop proposed also a special offer to Poland. This offer should be remembered now. Firstly, Germany was eager to guarantee full use of the Gdańsk port by Poland. And secondly, Germany offered non-aggression and friendship treaty, treaty of friendship for 25 years. After a short discussion with Ambassador Lipski, Ribbentrop did not receive any response, any successful response. Lipski transmitted the substance of German proposals to Foreign Minister Beck to Warsaw, and Beck responded negatively, saying that these conceptions lead to the violation of Poland's independence, and it would be absolutely impossible to reconcile them with the Poland's principles of foreign policy. He means independence and territorial integrity. We can say that Hitler, German Chancellor, wanted in this time to have Poland as a junior partner in German, młodszy partner in Polish. It means vassal state. As Hitler said to the officers of Wehrmacht in the end of August 1939, he wanted to have Poland vassalized and to start the war in the West against France, against the Western powers. But after victorious war in the West, he wanted to attack the Soviet Union with active participation of Poland. The central idea of the Nazi political program was the idea of Lebensraum, the idea of vital space in the East, the idea of vital space. And this idea required the occupation, military conquest and occupation of large territories of European Russia and Ukraine. Polish government was eager to reject German demands, but the cardinal decision was completed in January 1939. At the beginning of January 1939, Hitler invited Polish Foreign Minister Beck to Berchtesgaden, and he had short conversation. Hitler repeated the proposals which were well known in Warsaw since October 1938, and he said that Gdańsk is German and will be German. Danzig ist Deutsch und bleibt Deutsch. Extraterritorial connection was the second point of German demands. Polish foreign minister responded to Hitler saying that Gdańsk is, of course, inhabited by German majority, but Gdańsk was historically and economically always dependent on Poland, and Gdańsk is the window of Poland to the world, the window to the world. This is the guarantee of Poland's use of the access to the sea. Concerning the extraterritorial connection to Pomerania, Beck argued that it is impossible to accept. However, Poland had no objection to facilitate German communication through Pomerania. In this time, Polish Foreign Ministry elaborated a new counter-proposals for the German side, and they were consisted of 2 points. Firstly, there was the idea of preserving the free city by a new Polish-German accord, new Polish-German agreement, and secondly, Poland was eager to give Germany free and new connection through Polish Pomerania, however, without the clause of extraterritoriality. It would be a German motorway and German railway. It could be built by German industry. It would facilitate the communication through Germany and East Prussia, but no clause of extraterritoriality. This was the conditio sine qua non of the Polish government. In March 1939, Polish government was formally asked to respond for German proposals. German memorandum of March 25 was handed to Polish ambassador in Berlin, Count Lipski, and Polish government formally rejected it in the last conversation between Lipski and von Ribbentrop on 28th of March. The last decade of March is the turning point in Polish-German relations, turning point. We must remember that in this time, British government under the Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain started his action of the guarantees to Poland. The guarantees to Poland were offered by British Prime Minister and British Ambassador to Warsaw, Howard Kennard, proposed them to Colonel Beck in a direct conversation in March, in the last decade of March 39. Polish Foreign Minister received British proposal. However, he rejected the other British idea, the idea of consultations between Britain, France, Poland, and the Soviet Union. Beck wanted to avoid any conversations with the Soviet Union. He had a conviction that Polish eastern neighbor is not interested in the preserving of the territorial status quo, and this country cannot be Poland's ally in the future war. He rejected the idea of four powers conversations. As we all know, as it is well known for us, in the last day of March 31, British Prime Minister officially announced the guarantee to Poland. After 2 days later, Hitler signed his order to prepare the plan of military action against Poland. Plan Vice plan, White Plan. Was Polish decision taken in 1939 a good choice or not? It is a fundamental question for historians. In historiography, especially in public discourse, it reappears sometimes, this discussion. Was Polish decision taken rationally or not? Was it a realistic one or not? We must remember that British guarantees had only political significance. Without military force of Britain, they had no military dimension. Secondly, we must remember, of course, that the German military predominance was visible. But I think that there was no possibility of the other choice, in my opinion. There was no possibility of the other choice. There was the general will of Polish nation, of Polish people, to preserve their independence. It is the first argument. Secondly, the idea of cooperation with Germany against Soviet Russia signified nothing good, nothing positive. It led to the conquest of Russia, or it could lead to the defeat. And in both cases, the Poland's future could be unknown. There was no place for Poland in Nazi Europe. No place. In the Europe of German Lebensraum, in the Europe organized under the Nazi principles, there was no place for Poland. It is true that the German demands of 1938 and 39 were very moderate, but we can consider them only as a prelude to future demands. It is true that military elite of German army, high officers, generals, etc., and diplomats were against Hitler's moderation, so-called moderation in his demands, which were presented to Ambassador Lipski and to Józef Beck in Berchtesgaden in January 1939. I would like to say one thing more. It is true that British guarantees and Polish ultimate rejection of German demands took place on the same time. But we must remember one thing. The decision on the rejection of German demands was taken in Warsaw not in March, but at the beginning of January 1939. When Beck returned to Warsaw after his conversation with Hitler in Berchtesgaden, he communicated the substance of German demands to the President of the Republic and to Marshal Śmigłowicz. And ultimate decision was taken. There was no visible prospects for guarantees of the Western powers in January 1939. There was no guaranteeing offer. But the Polish leaders decided to reject the territorial demands, saying that they are absolutely impossible to be accepted due to the principles of Polish strategy and foreign policy. I think that one question is significant when we are speaking on the Polish-German relations in 1939. The most fateful fact of the international crisis in 1939 was the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact was mentioned here today. We must remember that the Western powers taken a decision. It was in May 1939 on the necessity to bring the Soviet Union to the front of the countries which are interested in the defense of the territorial status quo and peace in Europe. They started negotiations with the Soviet Union, initially political negotiations and finally military negotiations in August 1939. Soviet Union conducted a double game. Stalin's diplomacy was the diplomacy of double game. Initially, the Soviet Union proposed military pact against Germany, and this offer was sent to Paris and London. And from the other hand, the Soviet Union started secret talks with Germany. One day is symbolic, 17th of April, 1939, 17th of April. In this day, Soviet Foreign Commissar for Foreign Affairs Litvinov proposed a military defensive pact to the Western powers against Germany, and Soviet embassy in Berlin proposed a treaty of non-aggression to Germany. From the other hand, non-aggression pact to Germany and pact of war against Germany to France and to Britain. It is significant. I can say, as I think many historians has this idea in mind when they are talking on the international situation in 1939, that Western powers spent time for negotiations of the alliance with the Soviet Union, and they did nothing to reconstruct the French-Polish alliance and British-Polish alliance. It should be admitted that at the beginning of April 1939, Polish Foreign Minister Beck visited London, and after short conversations, the provisional agreement with Britain was concluded on April 6th in London, but there was no military convention between Poland and Britain, no military obligations which could be written on paper. Some days ago, French Prime Minister Daladier offered to Poland similar guarantees as Prime Minister Chamberlain did. It was in April 39, but the military protocol dated for May 19, which was negotiations by Polish Minister of Defense General Kastrzycki and French Commander-in-Chief of the Army General Gamelin, was not signed by French authorities, political authorities, and it was invalid until the beginning of the hostilities in September 1939. Polish diplomacy wanted to improve the atmosphere in German-Polish relations, but after Colonel Beck's speech in the Polish Sejm at the beginning of May 1939, and after Chancellor Hitler's speech in Reichstag, there was absolutely impossible to do something more than to passively observe the worsening of the situation. German propaganda exploited the difficulties of the German minority in Poland, the problems of the free city of Gdańsk, etc. And in the last moment of the peace, there was no possibility to achieve any understanding. The action of British diplomacy in the end of August 1939 led only to the exchange of views between Warsaw and Berlin, but nothing was done. It produced only one not positive consequences. It had one not positive consequences for Poland because under the German pressure, British and French governments advised not to proclaim general mobilization of the Polish army until the end of the peace. The Polish general mobilization was proclaimed on August 30. It was too late. It was too late for concentration, for mobilization of the Polish reserve forces. And let me to conclude in 3 points. First of all, I think that the conflict, territorial conflict between Poland and Germany was unavoidable. It is well known that after the signature of the Versailles Treaty, Roman Dmowski said to his collaborators, you know that Roman Dmowski was the chief of Polish delegation on the Paris Peace Conference, and he signed the Versailles Treaty in the name of Poland in Versailles. He said that this is not a peace. This is only an armistice for 20 years. An armistice for 20 years. These are words of Roman Dmowski. Independently, it is very interesting, independently, French commander-in-chief of the army, Marshal Foch, had similar observation, that it is the armistice for 20 years. Secondly, in my opinion, no different policy of Poland was possible. No different policy of Poland was possible in summer 39. There was no idea in Warsaw to adopt the other line of policy, and this other line was impossible. The capitulation is not a choice. Capitulation is not a choice. The capitulation on the side of one of the totalitarian neighbors or on the side of the other. This is not a choice. And the general will of Polish society, of Polish nation, was against capitulation and against territorial cession. Territorial cession was excluded from the political thinking in Polish political elites and in Polish society. And last remark, Poland, I think we can say it now after 75 years from the end of the Second World War, Poland paid a great price for her decision on the rejection of German territorial demands. It was attacked, it was occupied, and both totalitarian regimes conducted on Polish territory an exterminatory policy. And due to the Tehran and Yalta agreements, Poland did not regain the independence after the Second World War. It was under Soviet domination for half a century. Thank you very much.